King Solomon said, that what was is that what will be. And we know in Hebron that Abraham, when he lived in Israel, the first place he lived was in Hebron. And after Abraham there was Isaac and Jacob and the 12 tribes. King David ruled in Hebron first before he went to Jerusalem. So somehow Hebron has a tradition of being a first. And we have this feeling in our generation that it also will be a first. In some way, Hebron is the key to the rest of Israel. And the whole idea of Israel, the rest of Israel, is that we're being renewed again as a nation. And the nation, somehow it's like a tree. A tree starts growing from the earth. It can't start growing from the middle. And Hebron also is the sign that we've come back and that we have to start growing again. And to start growing, one needs first the attachment to the land. That we'll start growing from the land. And in Hebron, as in the other parts of Judah and Samaria, which we received miraculously after the 6-Day War, we're beginning again the beginning of the growing of the Jewish nation. And we're starting the growing of the Jewish nation and the self-realization of the Jewish nation by the tie to the land. And by establishing ourselves to the land and making it nachluyot and becoming again part of the scenery of the land of Israel, in that way we're starting the beginning of the nation that is again going to establish itself. To raise children in Israel is something very different from other parts of the world. In Israel, when the children take a hike, they come home and they say, I went on Joshua's route, and then afterwards we went on Caleb's route, and we came back by the road that Abraham went on. There's no lack of self-identification. There's a very strong identification with the past, and there's an absence of the many years that are between the history of the Jewish nation in its own land and the Jewish nation in the return to the land. It's as if all that time didn't really pass. And we are raising now children who have a firm feeling of attachment to the country where they live. And also, there's an end to this very abnormal atmosphere when we were always dependent upon the good moods of the local governors or the local policemen, that if we wanted protection or if we wanted fairness, then we would either have to bribe or to compliment or to do all sorts of tricks in order that the people who so-called protected us should like us. Here, we're living in a country where our own soldiers protect us, and we don't have to worry about bribes. For our Jewish soldiers, the lives of our children are as dear to them as their own children. And here, if there's anyone who wants to do an account with the Jews, then the Jews can protect themselves. It's something very different for children when they see that if something happens, if there's a terrorist attack or if there's a threat from an outside country, that the Jew himself in his sovereign position is the one who stands up and defends himself. And one doesn't have to run from place to place to find someone to protect us. That here anyone who rises against the Jew or decides that there's a good reason to do away with the Jew, he has someone to reckon with. And the people he has to reckon with is the Jewish people themselves and not protectors. Of course, the Jews argue a lot amongst themselves, but I think we do that everywhere. It doesn't matter where we are. we have a tendency to argue amongst ourselves. But here, we're masters of our own fate. And one can walk upright. And one can be not afraid. Because when one is master of one's own fate, that's something normal. However, the past history in the diaspora, it left its trace. And we're still not used to living as a nation in our own land. We still have a lot of the mentality that we had with us when we lived in the diaspora. And we're learning gradually to be a nation in our own right and to learn how to live by our own protection, by our own ways and means of producing, of defending. And it takes a while to be a nation in one's own right. We're still so used to living outside of Israel that we are more or less what I would say a nation in its diapers. But that's something that time will cure. And eventually we'll learn again and we'll get out of diapers and we'll learn again to be a nation in our own right.